Okay, so first of all, thank you all for being here. This is going to be a condensed version of the training we usually do that is quite generic. This is going to be geared towards specifically chartering a club. And as you probably already know, Agora is an educational nonprofit. I'm not going to repeat the things that are in the presentation. We've probably already seen it. We're present in over 70 countries with over 15,000 members. And well, anything I can paint actually gets obsolete quite quickly. Right now we have about 125 clubs, and we're opening like one or two every week. Which are the core skills that Agora teaches as such? Actually, I would say that it's just one with three legs that support it, and that's leadership. Leadership, not theoretical leadership, but practical leadership, put into practice into specific things. And then we have supporting skills that are public speaking, debating, and critical thinking. Since we have a short time, I don't want to delve too much into those skills. There are other recordings of other meetings where we go into much more detail on each of those skills, what they mean, how we teach them, what they represent, how they can benefit you. But for this particular one, I want to go directly to the actual mechanics of how the whole thing works, especially for those that have never been members of any kind of similar organization. We're by no means the only one existing on Earth. In fact, this kind of practice has existed since Roman times, so nothing new under the sun, really. We're just giving it a new spin. In Agora, there are no teachers as such. We don't have seminars. Well, we do have occasional online trainings, that's for sure. But in the day-to-day life of a club, unless you invite some expert, there are no teachers or experts as such. It's all, you can consider clubs to be self-practice groups in which you learn using the educational materials that we provide. You prepare. The educational materials you'll see are divided into different projects. Each project has specific goals. And then you have to prepare the project according to those goals. The goals can be very varied depending on whether the project is about public speaking or leadership or something else altogether. Then you prepare. Preparation can be either standalone or with a mentor. And then the practice is and the two tech stages are the most important ones. You practice that project, or you execute that project if you want, in front of the club, if it's a public speaking project, or in the real world, if it's a leadership project. And then you receive feedback from both from your fellow members, so it's a peer-to-peer feedback, and from a specially appointed evaluator for the occasion that provides some much more specific and detailed feedback. So usually people here ask, how is it possible for people to learn or to acquire a skill if they don't go to a seminar taught by an expert? And I usually use the cooking analogy. Imagine that you want to become a professional cook, or a very good cook at least, a chef. You have two options. You can sign up for a seminar or a workshop with, I don't know, pick the most famous chef that you know, Gordon Ramsay, Ferran Adrià, whomever. And yeah, you spend a lot of money, you learn for 1 week, and then you start cooking. Hopefully you interiorize everything well. And there is the other approach, which is you join a cooking club. And then every single week you cook, you learn how to cook a dish from online materials, and you prepare that dish for all your fellow members. And then they give you feedback. Well, it was okay, it was so-so, the texture was not. And if you do that week after week after week after week, I can assure you, and not only I can assure you, research shows that you can become a much more proficient cook than if you just sign one time to a seminar. Of course, if you have lots of money, you can sign like every week to a seminar, but this is not the case for most of our members. So basically, you are being constantly practice and you are being constantly evaluated, not evaluated as in scored or judged, but evaluated as in given an opinion of how you did, how the audience received your message or your speech in general. So evaluations are a critical part of the whole learning cycle. And evaluations, I want to insist, they are just opinions. They are not academic judgments or ex cathedra statements. And I want to go back again to that cooking analogy, because usually people say, well, but I'm not an expert in public speaking, so how can I evaluate something that is outside of my field? How can I have an opinion on that? And that's not really the case. If you go to a restaurant, if you go to watch a movie, after you leave the restaurant, you do have an opinion on how the food was, whether the service was good, whether you liked the dishes, whether the fish was tasty or was undercooked or was raw. And the same thing with movies. You do have an opinion on the movie you just watched. You usually say, well, the script was okay, it was cliche, the actors was a bit, I don't know, not very natural, the effects were good or the effects were terrible. You do have an opinion despite not being an actor, despite not being a director, despite not being a movie producer or a chef or a waiter. So you do have an opinion. And with public speaking, it's the same. We don't view public speaking as a goal in itself. We don't want to train public speakers that will become in the future public speaking consultants. I mean, if they do, fine, but that's not our goal. We want to train public speakers that will actually use public speaking for something better than that. So you will be addressing people that are also not experts in public speaking. You will be addressing, I don't know, shareholders. You will be addressing general audience. You will be addressing political members of a political party to achieve your goals. So they are not experts either, but they will have an opinion on how you did. So the fact that you are not an expert in public speaking, or even the fact that you're just beginning in public speaking, that shouldn't stop you from having an opinion and sharing it, especially if it contains things that the speaker can improve. Those are the opinions that are especially valuable. Now, there are a few core principles in Agora that we enforce rather strictly. The first of all is that we are neutral. I mean, all clubs should be neutral, meaning that we're not affiliated with any political agenda. We're not affiliated with any religion. Clubs cannot endorse officially any position on anything. And this has a special meaning because we are a worldwide foundation and we have members all over the place. So, for example, even if something seems like supernatural to you and there is unanimous opinion that the club should endorse it, or even the foundation itself, like, for example, I don't know, freedom of speech. I think we can all agree on that, here at least. But the thing is that the moment there is an official statement that we support free speech as a club, that can cause trouble in countries where there are Agora members and that they have that kind of limitation. This doesn't mean that the individual member cannot have an opinion. Not at all. I mean, we in fact encourage individual members to speak passionately about whatever bothers them, whatever it makes sense for them, and even on controversial issues. You shouldn't shy away from that. You should have strong opinions. You should be free to express them, and even at the risk of offending someone, because that's the whole point. I mean, if you want to speak about the things that matter, you will probably end up offending someone, but that shouldn't stop you from doing that. But one thing is the individual member, and members are completely free. Another thing is the organization as such. There is only one thing in which we are not neutral, and that's in our bylaws. And well, apart from these core principles that you see, and that's that we support science as understood by and encourage science and scientific research and scientific progress as understood by the scientific community. But on other topics like politics, religion, worldview, economical systems, moral values, as such, clubs cannot have an opinion, and the organization as a whole doesn't have one either. Another core principle is non-discrimination. People cannot be discriminated when joining Agora. There is a small caveat because usually people ask me that, and I'm surprised that that is considered a discrimination. It is in a kind. Of course, if the club works in English, if the working language of the club is English, then obviously people need to know English in order to be a member of that club. So that's a kind of discrimination that is allowed. But for example, obviously you cannot discriminate on religion, you cannot discriminate based on opinions, you cannot discriminate based on, I don't know, sexual orientation or gender identity or things like that. I think that's quite clear for everyone. Then we have tolerance. That's especially important, connecting with what I mentioned before, that members are encouraged to speak and to have strong opinions on things that matter, not on blunt things that everyone can agree, but on things that matter. And we require tolerance, meaning that you should be able, as an Agora member, to tolerate opinions with which you strongly disagree. But still, I mean, opinions are free, opinions are valid. I wouldn't say that every opinion needs to be respected, but I personally don't respect all sorts of opinions. But that doesn't mean that you should not tolerate them. Everyone should be free to express their own opinion, and members should try not to react emotionally to them. If you deeply disagree with something, you still have to listen to it, and you can give a speech with an opposing argument. No big deal. Or you can have a debate in the club about that. But above all, tolerance is paramount. There is only one kind of speech that we do not allow in Agora, and that's hate speech, meaning speech encouraging violence towards others. Apart from that, members can choose their own topics. Clubs, by the way, can restrict, if they want to, the topics on which members can speak. That's the club's decision, as long as they don't take a view. So, for example, you cannot say, we are not going to allow government criticism in our club. No, you can say, we're not going to talk about the government at all, neither, or about politics at all, neither good nor bad. We are not going to praise, we're not going to criticize, but you cannot take sides. We still don't recommend, except in some specific countries, that you do not place restrictions. Tolerance is an important skill to acquire, and listening. And then, obviously, we're a non-profit. You've probably seen in the presentation that we don't charge anything. And clubs should be non-profit as well, which doesn't mean that they can't charge dues. We'll talk about that a bit later. And the fifth core skill is intellectual honesty. We believe, as I mentioned, in the scientific method and in the scientific form of inquiry. And in fact, we consider it something good if people constantly review, reassess their own positions, and if the evidence changes, or if you change your mind, that's perfectly fine. We consider it, in fact, something positive if someone is able to say, I was wrong on this because, well, facts has proven me otherwise, so I've changed my mind. Actually, we believe that makes much better leaders than just stay the course regardless of anything. Now, how do club meetings proceed? Usually, you have a meeting leader that is in charge of the meeting, and then you have different sections. Here I have illustrated just a few sections that you can have in a meeting. Every meeting is different, meaning that all the roles like meeting leader or prepared speeches are performed differently by different people every meeting. It shouldn't be the same person over and over again. Each of these sections has a specific goal. And then we have some lateral goals. Okay, Mirela. Some lateral roles or transversals that encompass the whole meeting, like a timer, because all the sections are timed. In the real world, you have to stick to the allotted time, and if not, no one is going to tolerate you to rant on and on and on forever. You'll be cut off, your mic will be silenced, and that will be the end of it. So you'd better transmit your message, learn to transmit your message within the allotted time. And a grammarian that monitors the use of language that you make, not from an academic viewpoint. Well, if in your club you have someone that proficient, then okay, he can occasionally be a grammarian. Please don't ask him or her constantly to be a grammarian because he'll run away. But also as a person that takes note of exceptionally fortunate expressions, good usage of language, not only bad, but also good usage of language, good usage of rhetorical devices, and also counts what we call filler words, or words, not only filler words, but also words that are, or expressions that are parasitic to your language. This can be like constantly asking, or or doing long vowels if you don't know what to say, like I want to talk about things like that. All of that is, we have quite detailed documentation on all the roles. Occasionally, you may want to have in your meeting other roles that apply to every single section, especially in those meetings that are targeted at improving a particular quality in the public speaking of the club. For example, we have listening evaluators, we have body language evaluators, and they have perform a specific task. Now, you can't have all of it in all meetings because everything takes time. And at the end, you want to have a meeting that is decently sized, somewhere between 1 and 2 hours. Otherwise, it becomes tiresome. And now the important part is that every single section has an evaluator. An evaluator that, again, reviews. He doesn't judge, he doesn't score, he doesn't say, oh, well, I give you a 5. No. An evaluator is someone that simply expresses his opinion on how he felt the speech and whether the speech met the goals or not of the project. Now, meetings are not improvised. You should have an agenda that specifies what is going to happen in the meeting, in which order, who is going to have each role. Then right before the meeting, as always, someone will not show up, and the meeting leader will have to improvise. But at least there is some sort of order so that the meetings can be productive from an educational viewpoint and not just transform themselves into some kind of social activities where we just drink and talk about our lives. I mean, social activities are important, especially for creating a tight community. But remember always that the focus of Agora is educational. It's not just, I don't know, having clubs for meeting. You have many other organizations like that. You don't need us, which are much bigger and much more popular. And the important part about the agenda is also that it clearly specifies the minimum and maximum times that each section should have. And it's the role of the timer to control that. In fact, the timer can and should kick out of the stage. There is a special procedure of a speaker that has gone on for too long. So we have many sections that you can have in a meeting, and we are constantly adding new ones. This will be especially important for people that come from other organizations because we have a much more varied, let's say, array or choice of sections. Each club configures how they want their meetings. They don't need to have like every single section, every single meeting. They can vary. There's some minimal requirements, but other than that, the clubs are free to configure their agenda as they wish. And we constantly keep adding sections because, in fact, we encourage clubs to try out new things, and if they work, to share them with us so that we can standardize them document them and standardize them for all the clubs. And since the beginning of this year, we have added like 4 sections similar using this procedure. So the usual meeting will remember that you can ask questions at any time. Don't wait for me to finish. The usual meeting usually goes like that. It's opened by the meeting leader, or what we call the facilitator, and he introduces the meeting. Well, typical things: asks people to turn on their mobiles, explains a bit about the club, explains a bit about Agora, explains a bit about what we do, introduces guests maybe if there are. Well, of course, this can vary depending on who is attending the meeting. For example, in a corporate club that are never guests and they are all employees, of course, they are not going to be talking about what's the purpose of the club every single time. It's just pointless. And then the meeting leader can introduce the timer, and then the timer explains why timing is important, what he's going to do, and so on and so forth. The same with the grammarian. The grammarian talks about his role. This is like the initiation section. And then you have the body of the meeting, which is composed of the different sections that I mentioned. And for each of them, there will be one person in charge of that section. It can be improvised speeches. It can be a prepared speech. It can be the thought of the day. It can be thinking critically. It can be today we travel to, which, despite the name, is a very socially oriented section that fights demonization and dehumanization and stereotyping. And The meeting leader will give the floor to that particular person. That particular person will perform whatever needs to be done in that section. And then the meeting leader will give some time for the evaluator to write down what his opinion is. And then there will be an evaluation of the section. You can do the evaluation after each section, or you can do all of them at the end. That's a bit up to each club. And then at the conclusion, usually it's in reverse. So the meeting leader will call the grammarian. The grammarian will point out at good and bad examples of language use. Will provide a report on how many as, clutch words, parasite words everyone used. There is, we use also a thing called the word of the day, or the expression of the day, or the idiom of the day, or it can be the gesture of the day, although that's a bit forced. That consists in a word or a phrase or an idiom that people are encouraged to include in their speeches. And the goal of that, first of all, is enriching your vocabulary. I mean, the grammarian shouldn't pick an easy word like today or spring. It should be something that is not obvious. And the second goal is encouraging people not to memorize their speeches, because there is one of the things that's an absolute priority in Agora in the training model is that every member, every speaker has to develop their own speaking style, whatever is more natural to them. We don't want to have, like someone was commenting the other day on the Facebook group, an Agora model of speech. No, if we end up there, it's a terrible failure for Agora. You should have your own style. You should have a natural style. In fact, many of the, and that's different from other organizations as well, many of the speaking projects have actually two parts. In one of the parts, you have to analyze a speech by someone else, by a politician, by a businessman, by an actor, or simply by a person that you like, that it's anywhere, on TEDx, on YouTube, and you have to analyze that speech from a particular viewpoint. You have to analyze it, for example, from the viewpoint of body language, or you have to analyze it from the viewpoint of vocal variety, or rhetorical devices, or structure, and then you present that analysis to the club. So in this way, we try to expose members to a lot of speaking styles so that they can build their own styles. And then after you do that speech analysis, then you do your own speech. You don't jump initially straight away into, okay, let me do vocal variety. And as I mentioned, developing a natural style requires that, well, that you're natural on the stage. You cannot come on the stage or in front of an audience with a memorized speech, because that is detected immediately. You will sound very artificial. And there are other dangers, like, for example, forgetting where you are in the speech, getting blank and getting blocked. Memorizing is never a good idea. So that's why we have this word of the day or whatever of the day, so that even if you have a speech more or less prepared, you can on the fly alter things. In fact, by the way, we have an advanced path or an advanced activity that is very funnily called Against All Odds. That is for more advanced speakers, which trains you to overcome I wouldn't say typical, but unfortunately they are the typical failures that you can experience giving a professional speech. Your projector may fail, the speaker before you may take half of your time, or may end too short, or may talk about the same topic, and you have to be able to react to that. You have to be able, in a professional setting, if you're giving a keynote speech in a conference, you cannot just say, oh, I'm going to parrot the exact same speech that I had prepared. You have to be able to let's say, continue gracefully, regardless of anything. That's why it's called Against All Odds. And then we have the timer report that simply says how much time each of the people used. And then we have a meeting evaluator that wraps the whole thing and evaluates the evaluators and the meeting itself, whether the venue was good, whether the meeting started on time, whether there was too much noise or no, whether everyone performed their roles more or less appropriately, and so on. And of course, the important part of all evaluations is making suggestions for improvement. People that receive the evaluations, they are free to take those suggestions or not. In fact, usually you will see that, especially from the audience, you will sometimes receive contradictory evaluations, like you spoke too quickly, or too fast, or you spoke too slow. that's your decision whether to use that feedback or not. But at least you should consider it as a gift that you have it, because most people, most audiences, and that's in fact one of the main roles of the clubs, that they provide a safe environment, a fun environment, a supportive environment where you can practice and not be judged. Unfortunately, the real world is much harsher than that. So, and by the way, that's why in our educational project, we we start from activities that happen only within the club, but as you move towards the advanced paths, you will be required more and more to speak outside of the club. So, for example, if you want to be a storyteller, you actually have to go to a storytelling club and then tell a story to an audience that is paying there for listening to you, and they won't be as friendly as a club. Or if you want to be um, a humorous storyteller, you have to go to a stand-up and perform there at the culmination of your project and education. At the end, what I mentioned, we try to teach all the things that we teach so that they are useful in the real world and not in some sort of agora bubble. Now, of all the activities that I mentioned, there is one which is the prepared speeches that has a structure, meaning that it is something that is divided into projects and you have to do the projects in order. We have what is called the basic educational path that is comprised of 16 projects, including things like how to do PowerPoint presentations, which is in the modern world, unfortunately, very necessary, how to use microphones, how to use vocal variety. We have some projects that teach techniques that are applicable to any kind of speech, like, for example, having a clear structure or having just one message and not being all over the place in what you want to say or transmit. And then we have more advanced techniques that may or may not be appropriate depending on the context. So, for example, we have a project about using emotion in a speech. It depends. If you're in a shareholders meeting or if you're giving an educational speech, then maybe emotion is not appropriate. Emotion, the way people usually understand it, right? Not the psychological term. Using humor, for example, using humor may or not maybe not be appropriate. Again, in a shareholders meeting, probably it's not appropriate to use humor, at least when you're presenting some kind of results. And then once you finish with the basic educational path, if you want to continue learning across some more specialized domains, we have what we call the advanced educational paths that are also structured in projects. Each of them has between 8 and 12 projects that have to be performed in order as well. Now, about evaluations. By the way, not all the advanced paths are currently ready. We have ready like 3 of them, but they are still not deployed because right now our documentation is open to everyone, even anonymous users on the internet, and that we need to close so that it's only available to members, and then we will deploy those advanced paths. Everything will still be free, but at the end of the day, we need to have know what is our size in particular, because our funding sources so far, or will be hopefully in the future. So far, they are 100% private, meaning individuals. But in the future, we definitely do want to have access to European Union funds or company funds in order to keep everything free for all the rest of the people. And for that, we need to justify that we are this and this size and we didn't do this and that. So it's important for us to have a roster of members and clubs. Now, about the evaluations for speeches, I want to mention that for the prepared speeches, there will be 2 kinds of evaluations. There will be a specially appointed evaluator, who will be different in each meeting and for each person. It's not always the same person that evaluates you. And he will evaluate you, or he will give you feedback according to a special evaluation card that depends on the project. For each project, there is one very specific card that tells the evaluator what he should be looking for. So, for example, if this project is about practicing structure in a speech or having a clearly structured speech, then the evaluation card will ask questions such as, was there a clear opening? Was there a clear ending? Was the speech divided into clear sections? Were the transitions between the sections smooth? And things like that. If the speech is about something else, if the project, is about something else like vocal variety, then the evaluation criteria would be different. And then Apart from your specially appointed evaluator, you will receive feedback from all the rest of the club members and guests. But unlike the evaluator that gives you a verbal evaluation in front of the club, the rest will be written, and you have like general feedback forms. This is a suggested design, although we don't like impose anything. And everyone will have their say on a number of criteria, like where did they think you were natural on the stage? Did you use appropriately language? Did you use humor appropriately? Things like that, and hopefully provide suggestions for improvement. And yes, at the end of each path, you do get a digital certificate or a printed certificate and a digital badge conforming to a standard that's called open badges. That's added to your profile. But as I always say, you shouldn't be focused on the certificate. There are some countries in which apparently certificates are super important and people need them. It's just a paper. What's more important is the training that you've been through and the skills that you've acquired. Apart from those things, we do a lot of other things like conventions. We do have regional conventions or the recent international convention in Lisbon. Each year we do them in a different country, hopefully in a different continent. So next year, for example, is going to be in Nepal, 2020, 18 to 20th of September. And for next year, we are starting with our contests. We have 4 speech contests in very specific areas. Again, as you can see, we don't have a contest for just speaking. We want the speeches to have a purpose. In fact, one of my personal favorite quotes is by Kennedy, who said that the only reason to give a speech is to change the world. Otherwise, well, that's my addition. Otherwise, shut up and sit down. So we'll have a contest for the best educational speech, for the best storyteller, for the best social awareness speech. As you can see, these are topics that people can have a strong opinion on, and the best humor speech. And we'll have a non-speech contest, which is for sort of a leadership contest, actually, which is for the best community project. We'll talk about community projects later on, but for now, when clubs start, let's say the public speaking part is the easiest one to get started, and then once the club is stable, they can think about the leadership part and the community projects. Now, where to find all of this? Most of all of our documentation right now is on this site, wiki.agoraspeakers.org. And let me do something quick. I just want to show it to make sure that everyone knows where to find things, because that is usually a big obstacle apparently in starting the club activity. This is our wiki site. It's not the website as such, but almost everything is here. So the meeting rows, all the sections that I described before are here. Every one of them explained. So for example, if you want to have Today We Travels To, you have, for example, everything explained. This is, as I mentioned, a section that fights stereotyping of people. And you will have the evaluation card right here for the evaluator. And in terms of the educational projects for the prepared speeches, they are all here. Well, here or here they will be when we deploy them. Those for the basic educational path, for example, are here in basic educational path, and you have the 16 projects. So for example, I don't know, if you pick this one, speaking about the things that you like, you will see what are the learning objectives, what are the prerequisites, how much time is allotted for this particular speech, what needs to be done, yada, yada. And then you will have the evaluation card, which is opens as a PDF file. Did everyone see all of that? I hope I was sharing the right screen. Then we have other places like worldwide chat. We are deploying those systems because we want to get away from Facebook. There are many people that are not comfortable with having an account on Facebook. That's perfectly understandable, or anywhere else. We cannot depend on them. Unfortunately, we have had problems with them in the past. So we're deploying our own infrastructure for registering, for example. you only need a username and an email, and that's and a country and a city, of course, so that we can tell you which club is nearest to you. But other than that, there's no additional information. If you want, you can give, but that's already up to you. So we have a forum system, and we'll be deploying systems for tracking accounting and for managing clubs online. And well, there are a whole lot of services that we'll be providing. In fact, by the way, Agora is built quite collaboratively. So we have different work groups, for example, for creating our youth program, or for creating the rule books for the different contests or for different sections. So as I mentioned, it's all a collaborative effort. So hopefully you will participate. I say hopefully because we would appreciate more involvement sometimes. So let me resume where I was. Okay, so the first meeting. Okay. Let me share the screen again. So what to do on the first meeting? There are many things that you can do, although the suggested structure of a very first meeting would be to have a prepared speech, the very first project, which could be speaking about the things that I like, a speech evaluation. Everything should be evaluated in a meeting, because that's the way people learn, by getting feedback. If you just go there, give a speech, and everyone says, well, you were fine, everything was great, you're not learning anything. Of course, an evaluation, there's in fact a whole article about how to do proper evaluations. Evaluations should be actionable. We'll do special trainings on that topic because it's super important. An evaluator has many roles, including motivating, encouraging, pointing out things, suggestions for improvement, and they should be actionable, not just like, oh, you're too short or your voice is too coarse. Well, excuse me, that's how I was born. I cannot do anything about that. But if the suggestion is actionable, then that's very valuable. So, for example, if he says, I think the ending was a bit abrupt, maybe you should have ended with on a high note, or with a call to action, or with a quote, or with a suggestion that the speaker can actually take and apply next time. You should have what we call the analytical team, and that includes the timer and the grammarian. There can be other evaluators, but for a start, that's enough. The thought of the day, which is an easy speech, can be done by anyone, and the hot questions, which is a section for improvisational speaking, whereas the person that is in charge of that section will pick up volunteers, in fact victims usually, and ask them random questions, preferably about real life, not like imagine you're a gorilla, but imagine you're at a job interview and you get asked this question. So the goal is training people to improvise on the spot and to think quickly on their feet. And this is the usual structure that we suggest for a first meeting. Like, I'll share the slides, by the way, after the meeting, so no need to read them right now. But we recommend, with those rows that I mentioned before, you have a meeting that is between 1 and 1.5 hours. If you add all the quantities, it's 1 hour, but since we have like a tradition of everyone clapping when someone goes to the stage, everyone clapping when someone walks off the stage as a sign of support and encouragement. And then we have, usually the meeting leader will not merely say, and now John is going to do his first project. Usually he will say something about that John, so that the club knows something about that person. It can be a different thing every time, or a random question. Like usually the meeting leaders, the good meeting leaders will get in touch with all the participants before the meeting and ask them something random, like something funny, a piece of trivia. What's your favorite superhero? What do you want to become in the past? And then they share that during the meeting when introducing that person. In fact, introductions are an art as well, and people need to know how to do them. And for that first meeting, you need just 8 people. That's why our minimum number of members for starting a club is 8. You need a meeting leader, someone that will do the timer, grammarian, a speaker, a speech evaluator, someone that will lead the improvisation section. Optionally, a thought of the day. Well, thought of the day, it's a thought of the day, but it could be idea of the day or movie of the day or whatever of the day that I feel like talking about, the news of the day, and a meeting evaluator. Now, what kind of clubs do we have? We have 4 types of clubs. Oh, I see something in the chat. Where can the chat? Well, the chat is on chat.agoraspeakers.org. I mean, it's the software specifically that hosts it is called Rocket Chat, and it has a native. It can be accessed via the browser, and also there is a native client for iOS and Android that you can download from the stores. You just need to point it to our server, and that's it. So we have 4 types of clubs. I'm speaking here under the assumption that the kind of club that you're going to be opening or chattering is an open club, which is open to everyone without restrictions. We have a special kind of club that are called public interest clubs. Those are clubs that, due to their nature, are restricted. Not everyone can join, but we still consider that they perform a public service, and we don't charge them anything. So, for example, those would be clubs in schools, where usually only the students or teachers or faculty can attend, or clubs in prisons, or clubs in governmental institutions. So, for example, well, if you have a club for civil servants of the Ministry of Defense, obviously not every random person from the street can join, but still we consider that it's good for those institutions to have those kinds of clubs, and we encourage them. So those are free. Now, not every single type of club is free. I mean, some do have to pay us. In fact, I wouldn't want to say business model, but our sustainability model is that we will have clubs that pay us, and those are corporate clubs that are restricted to employees of a particular company. And restricted club, usually those are professional restrictions, like a club only for members of only for judges, or a club that is restricted for members of a professional association, or things like that. Those clubs do have to pay a fee, both per club and per member. And we have a special kind of club that is being developed. We have already had many activities, and we are learning a lot from the process. So we are creating a special kind of youth program, which is like a condensed version of the Agora program for kids. And we call that usually people below 13, let's say preschool and early school ages, because anyone above 14, 15, we consider them completely able to follow the adult program. Now, what is the recipe for success for starting a club? Well, actually, the biggest and most important thing is starting at some point, because most of the club failures that we have seen are actually due to never ever even starting. I always give 2 examples. There is one club, they no longer exist, that delayed starting for 1 year because they were trying to draft the perfect club bylaws, which are not necessary even, by the way. So there's never going to be a perfect moment for starting. There's never going to be a perfect venue. There's never going to be a perfect set of members, or you will never know 100% the whole of Agora, because, by the way, we keep adding things all the time. So you have to start at some point. Another excuse that I faced once was that, well, we can't chart. They charted the first meeting 2 months and a half in advance. And I told them, listen, that's not really a schedule. That's not a plan. That's an idea. You haven't scheduled a meeting. You have the intention to schedule a meeting. But if you schedule 2 months and a half in advance, that's not really a schedule. Yeah, but there are going to be elections in our country. Yeah, but there's always going to be something. If it's not elections, then it's the start of the school year, or the end of the school year, or holiday, or a football match, or whatever. There's always going to be something. So biggest part of the whole effort, start. And make mistakes. Yeah, that's the thing. You will make mistakes. We made mistakes all the time. In fact, Agora started in quite a rocky way. We didn't even have the educational program started, but we started nonetheless. and we learn from them. The point of the whole thing is to iterate quickly, to act, then to make the mistake, to learn from it, and to repeat over and over again. Same thing as with the learning cycle. Now, specifically, what's the process for creating a new club? Although most of you have already gone through it, but still, first of all, you need to have the knowledge. Attending trainings like this, reading the documentation, that's the online site. Then we have a full guide that is translated into quite a few languages, although a bit of them are obsolete and we are looking to update them now. For example, the guide in Ukrainian is 2 years old, but now since there is a strong campaign to open many clubs in Ukraine, we are going to be updating those materials. But still, the core mechanics is there, so it can be used. Asking questions, of course, and we have many clubs have recordings, video recordings of their meetings, evaluations, speeches. That's a good thing to watch. When I share the slides, you can click on the link and watch several meetings and evaluations. In general, know how we work, but don't try to know everything before starting. Again, don't look for perfection. Just look for the bare minimum to start. And then you will learn a lot more in the process. By the way, starting as soon as possible also addresses one important problem, and it's that many times people are trying to find solutions to imaginary problems. They are trying to solve things that are only hypothetical, but they view them as real problems. Okay, and what will happen if the venue is too noisy? And what will happen if we do this campaign and it turns out that no one signs up? And in fact, when you start, you will realize that many of those things were not really real problems, and you'll face others that are more important, that are real, and you have to address them. So starting as soon as you can will let you know, to use that analogy, what's the real temperature of the water and what are the problems you need to be actually addressing, instead of fantasizing about which problems could be potentially facing. Then you have to decide things about your club. So for example, the club name, in order to avoid confusion between the Agora organization as such and the club, there are certain limitations about what can and cannot be part of a club name. It's not necessary to be called Agora. It could be called, I don't know, Brilliant Speakers of Sarajevo or something like that. And you have to decide also on a club logo. We strongly recommend that each club has a logo, because that's the way most of the design materials work. They allow you to place. If you don't want to design your own logo, then we can create a standard one for you, which is using basically the Agora logo with your name. But we encourage, in general, there are certain rules about how to use the brand and all that. You will see them in the documentation, but the important thing is that we do encourage people to use like parts of our logo for creating their own, and it's quite funny to see some of the effects. Also, you have to decide on whether your club will have fees or not. These are not fees that you pay to us. These are fees that members pay to your club and that are used for sustaining the club's operation, for possibly paying a venue, for paying photocopies, for buying, I don't know, a projector, for buying microphones. You get to keep all of that, meaning you don't pay us a percentage or anything like that. And you decide how much. If you want to charge, I don't know, €5 per meeting, that's fine. If you want to charge €1,000,000 per meeting and you find members that will pay you that, please tell us. It will be fine as well. The thing is that if you charge members a fee, you do have to comply with some special rules about transparency and proper use of the funds. So for example, you have to have your accounting online, your detailed accounting online for all the Agora members to see, not only your club members, but all Agora members worldwide. It's a kind of a cross audit so that we make sure that funds are used properly. And if the president or the president usually wants to use a big percentage of the club's funds, this has to be approved by the membership. There are more detailed, there's more detailed wording for each of those rules, but you can see that this just some ideas. Just to especially point out that your club can have fees to support itself. In fact, we do recommend that clubs have fees because there are always some expenses that need to be paid. So there's nothing wrong with having fees, and in fact, it also creates commitment from the members. And you have to decide also on the meeting frequency. You should be meeting at least once per month. Otherwise, the whole idea of continuity of constant practice goes to waste. And we do recommend that clubs meet weekly. That's up to you. You can meet bi-weekly, or you can meet like every first and third Thursday of every month, but it becomes a mess. Usually, if you meet weekly, it will be more difficult to start because not everyone can attend weekly, and you will face meetings with very low attendance. But on the other hand, your club will grow much quickly because people will not have to be thinking about, oh, well, what day is it today? Is it the first? Is it the third? Oh, today is the fifth Wednesday of the month. Is there a meeting? Where should I go? Usually consistency is what works best for clubs, even if it's harder at the beginning. But if you meet weekly, every Thursday, then every single person around you will know, okay, Thursday, there is a meeting. I know I can go. Now, the number of members, as I mentioned, the minimum is 8. We recommend between 10 and 12, though, for safety. And there is a set of officers. As I've explained, I think, in the chat, we don't manage clubs at all. Clubs are managed by their set of officers. And we do recommend initially to have at least 3 of them. Many more are necessary, but at least those 3 are indispensable. Otherwise, a single person is bearing the whole effort of the club, and that's not fair. Plus, everyone needs to learn how to perform a leadership role, and club leadership is like the super basic kind of leadership that you can do. There are much more advanced leadership practices that we have in Agora later on, especially in the field of community projects. And the final thing is finding a venue. Again, ask for help from all the members. Ask for help from us, because we do run regular campaigns, and sometimes people do tell us, like it happened in Mexico City, or like it happened in Rabat, where some people told us, I have a school with a basement and a lot of associations meet there. I can offer that venue for free. Just tell me. I don't have time to be involved in the club, but I can offer my venue. Or the guy in Mexico who told us, I have a covered theater with a stage, you can use it. Or there was a guy in the Philippines that said, I don't have time, but I have a venue, I can offer it. I like what you're doing. And I like that it's a non-profit and you're not charging people, and especially in my country, I think that's very necessary. So sometimes you do have that option, but if there's no one that wants to start a club, it's useless either. Usually talking to schools and universities works because it's a win-win proposition for them. You get a venue for you, and they get an activity that they can offer their students absolutely at zero cost, because any of their students can join, especially if it's an open public club, which is the point, without any cost whatsoever, and the students don't have to pay anything. Well, the fees of the club, which theoretically are reasonable. If nothing else works, well, you can meet in pubs, cafes, and restaurants. Again, don't look for the perfect thing. Many clubs in Spain, for example, they meet in restaurants. Although I think it's part of the culture, because they always stay after that for beers and socializing. And open spaces, you shouldn't discard them. Meeting at the park, or if the weather is good. And it's actually quite an interesting thing. Clubs in Madrid do that frequently, because it pushes members out of their comfort zone. They need to be like in an environment they are not used to. They are talking, and people that they don't know, like passersby, are listening to them. And it's quite curious. Actually, that's also a great recruiting system, because the onlookers usually stay for a while, then become interested and start asking questions. So what do you do? Oh, that's interesting. And then they sign up as members. And then the final thing of all that is the club registration that affiliates it with Agora. So you need to have the first meeting scheduled, and it should be no more than 30 days in advance, because otherwise it's like an idea of a meeting, not an actual meeting. Ideally 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and not like tomorrow, because we do like to promote the first meeting and announce it so that we can, especially if it's the first club in a city or in a country more so that more members can join. Even if you only have like 10 people or 8 people, usually it's much different when we actually announce a meeting. Like, there's going to be a meeting. Many people that weren't interested before because there was nothing specific yet now become interested and they may attend. You have to fill in a registration form. That's the whole formality. You have to specify like, well, the club name and the agenda. We do request that you upload an agenda, basically so that we are aware that you know what Agora is, because many people, especially in some countries, non-European countries, they rush to have a club without even knowing what they are getting into. They think like, okay, we meet and that's it, and I have a club. No, I mean, it's an educational thing. There has to be structure, and there have to be some special activities in a particular way. And well, at least 8 members. And then we create these announcements that probably you have seen in the groups. And well, after the meet, and we promote that as an ad on social networks, not only on Facebook. And then, well, we hope that you will publish your pictures. You can do that yourself. No need to be sending them, in order to especially inspire and motivate others that may be thinking about starting a club. There's nothing more inspirational than seeing people actually accomplishing things, even if it's a slow start, even if it's only 5 members show up. I always tell the story of Ghana, for example. The first meeting of the person that started the club in Accra, only 4 people showed up, and that was like a month and a half ago. And now in Ghana there are 7 clubs, all of them with quite a good attendance. So don't be discouraged. Still share if the first meeting doesn't go as well. No big deal. So I managed more or less to finish on time, surprisingly. Now is your chance to, well, you already always had the chance, but now it's like, if you want to ask anything, just remember to unmute yourself, because all of you are muted right now. No questions. Absolutely nothing. I was either terribly good or terribly bad. Really?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Muammer Peknes. As you probably seen already, I would like just to thank you, Alexander, for such a nice speech about the club and for such a huge amount of information. I have been. I do not have any questions at all, but I would like to inform you that I've made a mind map about the all necessary steps that are needed to open the club.
Cool.
And
sure.
I would definitely need to improve it a little bit, and I will upload it tonight in our chat group. So
Excellent.
Thank you once more for everything.
Excellent. I think the thing that most concerns me, because that's usually the blogging point, is whether it's now clear what you're going to do on the first meeting. Because usually people just meet and okay, we have an Agora club, now what? So remember, there are many activities that you can do, but you need to start small. Yeah. Don't try to like grasp the whole the concept, yes, but not like read every single activity that can be. For example, we do debates, and I haven't mentioned debates at all, just at the beginning, but there is a whole set of rules about debates. But don't start with that. Start with the basics and then improve.
Yeah, just with public speaking, and then we will add everything else on
exactly,
that.
Exactly. Just get started. Get the ball rolling. That's the most important thing.
It is really.
And by the way, this is quite a popular activity. People find it fun, even those that are experienced. We recently were to a club that was charting in Alicante, in the southern part of Spain, and there was one person that was like a professional of communication for over 30 years, and he had a lot to improve in terms of public speaking. So there's quite a demand for that kind of training, especially with the other things added. leadership and critical thinking nowadays with all the things about fake news and people being manipulated left and right. And the fact that we are truly a non-profit, we're all volunteers here. No one is, well, we can't make any money out of Agora because we don't charge anything. So that makes it especially attractive. And it's a good presentation card in front of institutions. So for example, if you need us to send a university or a school a special letter, like official letter saying, hey, we're Agora, we're worldwide, we're a foundation, we're legally registered as a foundation in the European Union. This is our legal registration. We want to support this club in your city. We can do that. We can send that kind of letters. Anything else?
Hi, Alexander. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and for your time.
Thank you for being
Romania. Here. Yes. So, how long should be the, let's say, the first meeting, the main points that we have to discuss to think like those rectangulars?
I usually plan somewhere between 1 hour and 1 hour and a half.
I mean, the idea is to go with it until we get some experience, and then we can add other things. So we can...
Yeah, I would recommend so, yes. Because this thing here, let me try to find it out. Oh, darn. This kind of thing actually contains the bare minimum of the core activities.
Yes,
it has everything. It has a grammarian, it has a timer, it has improvised speeches and a prepared speech. That's all that you need. That for you have to consider that some clubs were running with this when we started for even several months, and they were all doing the first project because we didn't have any other projects at that time, like 3 years ago.
Okay. So what's the vision of Agora for humanity, let's say? I mean, what's the vision by developing these leaderships and these public speaking experts?
Well, that's a very good question, actually. It's more about leadership than, first of all, it's more about leadership than public speaking. Public speaking is an ability that leaders need to have. As I mentioned before, we view public speaking as a tool, not as an end in itself. And the vision is that, I don't know if you know the concept of the long tail that Google invented in advertising, in which before Google, everyone was focused on trying to get the business of the biggest advertisers, like, I don't know, energy companies, oil companies, media companies. They were all paying big advertising money, and everyone went after them. Instead, Google said, no, we want to offer individual entrepreneurs the option of paying $1, $2 for advertising. And that's how they made their business. That's called that's why it's called the long tail, because in the distribution of expenditures, it's the very long end of the tail, but it adds up. It adds up quite quickly. So our vision is to become the equivalent of the long tail in terms of social projects. And that's why the community projects part is quite important in Agora. We have a much more ambitious vision in terms of actual accomplishment than any other organization that I know. So that's why we're not only about public speaking. So the idea is that we will have millions of members, and that they will be learning how to be effective leaders. And during the process of learning how to be effective leaders, they will be actually leading community projects in their environment and having a positive impact in their environment. So maybe the community projects are small projects in nature. They are limited to 1 month or 1 or 2 months, and they don't need to be significant. Like, you don't need to develop the infrastructure of India. But the important point is that you're adding a small grain of sand, to use that metaphor, to your community. And that the added effect of all those people training to be leaders and in the process helping their communities, we expect that to be quite significant.
I have a question. Is there a section within any of these meetings for impromptu speeches?
Yeah, well, that's the hot questions. Yep.
Oh, that's hot question. Okay, okay, okay. Thanks.
It's all about, well, we have two of them actually. We have, let me see here. We have hot questions, which are realistic improvised speeches. Realistic meaning that the questions have to be realistic, like job interviews or social interactions, things that can actually happen to you in real life. And we have the icebreakers, which are not speeches, but are also improvised speeches that are more like humorous in nature, that are designed to break the ice in a club, that sometimes are used for language improvement, although we have a special section for that, with games for clubs that are using a language that is not native to the country, like it's your case, I guess, that are specific activities for improving English or, well, whatever language the club is operating in. But the icebreakers, for example, are for more improvised but funny, not so realistic questions. Like, imagine you're a superhero. Okay, well, that's for breaking the ice.
Also, so the point of the clubs isn't that it's natively in English. It can be in local language.
The clubs can be in any language. In fact, well, the clubs in Spain, except for one, they operate in Spanish. The clubs in Portugal, they operate in Portuguese. That's up to you. The only thing is that we need to be translating the materials. The educational materials right now are in English and in Spanish and in Portuguese. We have many of them in Polish because Poland was the second country to join Agora, well, after Spain. And we keep adding languages. So by all means, you can. What we do recommend, though, is that you don't have mixed sessions. So since starting a club doesn't cost anything, if you want to use two different languages, then just start two clubs. Otherwise, people get confused. And even if you organize things in a way that, let's say, for example, 1 week we speak in English, the other week we speak in Bosnian, for example, or in Albanian, the problem is that people that don't know English will skip those sessions altogether, and the people that are interested in English will go only to the English sessions. So it's just better to have two clubs in that case. I mean, still the same cost of zero. So.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Other questions? Slava, anything from you? Slava is from Lutsk or Lutsk. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, in Ukraine. Okay, I guess not. Okay, then that's it. Thank you, everyone. Remember that you can always keep asking questions on the chat or whenever, or just send me a private message.
Alexander, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for letting me be here, and because I think it's because I like to hear and see things more than just read.
Yeah.
And it became much more clear after your presentation. And
one thing that we need to do is video presentations and tutorials. Unfortunately, we haven't had the time. Again, we apply our own system. We didn't wait for perfection before starting. So.
I was just wondering how many members are too many members, and is there a time when you think you need to be split into two or more?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And in fact, there is no clear set criteria. There is a criteria because one of the main activities are the prepared speeches, because they are also the longest. A prepared speech takes between 7 to 10 minutes, and they are the most consuming part of a meeting usually. So in every meeting, you will only have time to do 2, 3, maximum 4, if your meeting is super long, prepared speeches. Because it's not only a prepared speech, then you have a 2 to 3 minute evaluation, plus the post to evaluate. So it becomes like 10 to 12 to 15 minutes every prepared speech. Which means that if there are a lot of members that want to speak, there will be at some point a waiting list, because all the slots for public speeches will be booked. If that waiting list becomes too long, and I would say if it becomes like, if I have to be waiting for over a month to be able to speak, then that's a good signal that you should consider splitting the club.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of members, it depends basically on the attendance, not so much on membership. But if you have like 15 to 20 people regularly attending, I'm not necessarily the same ones, but an attendance of 20. And if your club membership is somewhere near 50, I would say, then you will be having already waiting lists for speeches, and you should be thinking about splitting.
Mhm.
More?
Okay, I
Okay.
have to go. I have
Yep.
to go. I will see you.
See you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for being here. And now publish the training on the chat and on the general group.
Thank you. Thank you. All the
Thank
best.
you. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.